Hello everyone, today I'm going to explain to you about how the process of photosynthesis works and kind of show you exactly what's going on inside of the cell of an autotroph, like inside of a plant cell. Okay, so in this diagram we're basically zooming in inside of a plant cell, and this is showing you what's happening inside of the chloroplast, which is an organelle that's responsible for doing photosynthesis for the plant cell. So remember, in eukaryotic cells, there are different types of organelles, these smaller units inside of the cell that perform some sort of function. So the chloroplast, I'll write it right here. Okay, this organelle is called the chloroplast, and its function is to conduct photosynthesis so that the plant or any type of autotroph can make food for itself. And we know that the food that we're speaking of here is glucose. So let's go ahead and review the full balanced chemical equation reaction for photosynthesis. So just think about what a plant needs, okay, in order to stay alive. So we water it, okay, and in this reaction there's going to be 6 water molecules. Okay, and plants and trees and grasses are helpful in absorbing CO2, carbon dioxide gas, from the atmosphere. Okay, and there's also 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. Okay, and then in order to kind of kickstart, to initiate this reaction, there needs to be an input of light. So for some type of chemical reactions, there needs to be this input of energy. Sometimes they're not spontaneous. There needs to be some sort of input of energy to get it started. And in this case, it's going to be light energy. Okay? So when the plant cell absorbs light energy, the 6 water molecules and 6 carbon dioxide molecules are going to react to produce 1 molecule of glucose, and here's the chemical formula for glucose. Okay, this says that there are 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens in the glucose molecule. And this will also produce 6 molecules of oxygen. So it's going to make glucose for itself to either break down and make ATP energy, or it's going to use this glucose to make part of its structure, such as the cellulose in its cell wall. And then it's going to release 6 molecules of oxygen gas. Okay, this is released out into the atmosphere. So these producers, these autotrophs, are not only helpful in absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere, but it's also producing oxygen for other organisms to breathe in. Okay, so what we're going to do is apply this equation to this diagram so we can see what's happening to the starting material, the reactants of this equation, and then how these products are being released from it, okay, how these are being made. Okay, so again, this is the chloroplast inside of a plant cell, and it starts off here with the absorption of light energy. Okay, light is really being absorbed by this special pigment inside of this organelle called chlorophyll. Okay, chlorophyll is a green colored pigment that happens to absorb a certain wavelength of light. Okay, so this chlorophyll is actually located in these structures here called the thylakoid. Okay, and these thylakoid are basically they kind of look like stacks of tires, and they're smothered with this chlorophyll pigment. And so the light absorption is happening here, okay, and this is the input of energy to start photosynthesis, okay? And so photosynthesis inside the chloroplast can really be divided into two separate reactions. Okay, so the first one takes place within the thylakoid, and this is actually where the water molecule is going to enter. Okay, so when plants, for instance, uptake water through their roots, okay, the water molecules are going to enter the cells and enter in the chloroplast, and it's going to enter this reaction called the light-dependent reaction. And I'll put RXN, shorthand for reaction. Okay, so water molecule enters here. Now the energy being absorbed from the light, okay, which is why it's called the light-dependent reaction at the thylakoid, this light energy is being absorbed, and it's actually used to split the water molecule, and it releases oxygen. Okay, now in doing so, splitting the water molecule to release oxygen actually releases these high energy electrons. Okay, now this is going to result in these energy carrying molecules called ATP and NADPH. So when these high energy electrons are released, the NADPH, this chemical, and ATP are going to take that energy and carry this energy over to the second reaction. That's going to happen in the outside of the thylakoids. This area is called the stroma. Okay, but back to these energy-carrying molecules, let's talk a little bit about them. So when we talk about cell respiration later, we're going to talk a lot about ATP. ATP is actually the usable form of chemical energy for the cell. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. So because it's carrying a third phosphate, this means that it's high in energy. And it just wants to release that energy, and it's going to do so in this second reaction here that I'm going to talk to you about in just a moment. And then this other chemical here, NADPH, you're actually looking at the reduced form of this chemical because it has a hydrogen. That means it gained an electron that was released from this light-dependent reaction. This chemical stands for, the acronym for this stands for nicotinamide dinucleotide phosphate, and it's carrying a hydrogen. That means it's reduced, and it has the energy that it's going to drop off here out in the stroma. Okay, so these two high energy molecules are released out into the stroma, and it's going to release this energy so that the light independent reaction, or the Calvin cycle, can be executed here. Okay, Calvin cycle, named after the scientist that discovered it. And as its name suggests here, it's a cycle. So what's happening here is that this second reaction is happening, it's repeating over and over again as it's receiving this energy from the first reaction. So kind of think about photosynthesis as this input of energy in order to make its food. Okay, so basically putting in a little bit of energy so that the plant cell can get more energy later. It's sort of like investing money into a company. You put a little bit of money into a company, you invest it. Over time, if that company is successful, okay, you get a higher return. That money grows. So the same idea here. Okay, so we're putting in energy so that glucose can be made. Okay, now in this Calvin cycle, this is where carbon dioxide enters. Sorry about that, my camera's getting blurry again. Carbon dioxide enters. Okay, it's in the stroma. It goes through the Calvin cycle. Basically, to make a long story short, the Calvin cycle, there are several different enzymes involved. But basically what's happening here is that the energy is being used so that these enzymes can basically tear the carbon out of this gas. And that carbon is going to be fixed into this glucose molecule. So think about this. It's going to take an input of energy to basically turn this gas into a solid chemical, glucose. Okay, and this Calvin cycle repeats. It's taking in carbon dioxide and taking the carbon and building glucose out of it. Okay, so remember from our equation, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide enter so that we can get the 6 carbon atoms to make this glucose. Okay, that's what's happening right here. Okay. Now, as these energy-carrying molecules, ATP and NADPH, drop off their energy in order to make the Calvin cycle work, they lose energy. Okay, so ATP is spent, it becomes ADP, adenosine diphosphate. Okay, and NADPH, when it releases its energy, becomes NADP plus. Okay, so this is its oxidized form. It lost electrons, so it's now NADP plus. These actually travel back to the light-dependent reaction to pick up more energy. Okay, so that they can become ATP again and NADPH. And then again, it's just going to repeat. They're going to send that energy over to the Calvin cycle so that glucose can be made. Okay, so there you have it. That's photosynthesis. Okay, we applied this equation to what's going on here in the chloroplast. Thank you for watching.